So it's really, I mean, it's kind of funny. I think Rabbi Kelman, you and I were joking about this on the phone about we say, oh, you can't really say you're looking forward to Tisha B'Av, but it's as close as you can get. And I want to share with you, my friends, something which I think is actually very apropos for the final slot. Certainly after midday and certainly in the waning hours of Tisha B'Av, we're looking not just at our suffering, but we're hopefully looking forward. And we're hopefully looking to a year, God willing, next year, where we will be hopefully in the Messianic era. Hopefully Mashiach will come. And the reason I want to address this topic also is I have a little bit of a bias. So a little bit about some biographical background. I had the zechus, the privilege, perhaps one of the most pivotal parts of my pedigree was being able to study under the late Rabbi Dr. Moshe David Tendler Zatzal. And the way it kind of works in YU these days is the transition was already happening as I was there. That you had all these kind of younger teachers and Rosh Yeshiva who were coming in and everybody was flocking to their classes. And then we had some of the great Gedolim, the great Gedolei Rosh Yeshiva who were there. That somehow people kind of were shifting away to all the new fancy, flashy shiurim that were offered. I happened to have been able to join Rev Tendler's shiur. It was actually by accident initially. It happened to work out with my schedule while I was also doing my degree at Azrieli. But then I stayed on with him for not 2 years afterwards, but 3 years afterwards. We learned on campus until my final year, which was the same year as COVID. And for a solid, I'd say 6 months or so, even though we were kind of learning Eglei Tal and all the intricacies of Hilchos Shabbos, I'm not sure whether he suggested or I suggested it, but we kind of shifted things over to learning the Igros Moshe together. Now, for those who haven't made the connection yet, Rav Tendler would always be fond of quoting the Shver, the father-in-law, when he was in shiur. In addition to his own scholarship, he also happened to be the son-in-law of the great Rav Moshe Feinstein Zatzal. And so I had the opportunity to kind of learn Igros Moshe 101 with someone who was part and parcel of the process of creating the Igros Moshe. Virtually every medical halacha, shaila, and tshuva in there, whether it has his name on there as the shoel, as the inquirer, whether it had his name in there just referenced, or whether it didn't say his name at all, one knew that he was involved in the process. So we've actually been doing a series here. It's been on tradition, and we're doing it here at the shul right now called Unpacking the Igros, in which we're doing a deep dive into Rav Moshe Feinstein. Now, hopefully the source sheet, I think will get disseminated somewhere into the group momentarily. Thank you very much, Rabbi Kelman. So my way of analyzing is a little bit different. Most pulpit rabbis usually, everyone does an Igros Moshe shiur eventually. It was the monumental chuvos of the 20th century. So many important halachos came out from there, whether it be, the Manhattan Erevin controversy, of course, the Chalav Stam being able to drink milk. I don't know. I think Canada also, Rabbi Kelman. I think it applied there as well, that one can drink milk without concern for kashrus as well. Many artificial insemination. There's many that we can name. And so there's one topic actually, though, that I don't actually see addressed when you're looking at people doing a series on Igros Moshe. Every rabbi does an Igros Moshe series eventually. I think most rabbis do. It's low-hanging fruit. There's all these easy, fun topics to do. But what I tried to do was find certain topics that wouldn't jump out at people when they want to do an Igros Moshe series. And also what I was interested in was looking at the broader, what I like to call the Rav Moshe Feinstein cinematic universe. Now that it's not cinematic, it's just source sheets I have here, but it sounds cool because it sounds like it riffs off the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So it just sounds catchy. And what that means is that I like to look at not just Rav Moshe Feinstein the Igros, but also in his commentary on the Talmud, the Dibros Moshe, also his homilies, his Darash Moshe, but then also there's a lot of secondary literature as well, such as the Mesoris Moshe, his grandson wrote based on conversations with him, Mega Givos Olam, Michal Shurkin. There's Israeli academics who have done work on Moshe Feinstein, particularly Dr. Harel Gordon. There's a lot to work with over here, and some of it will come out here in this shiur today. So the question is as follows. Do I have to believe that Mashiach that the Messiah can arrive at any moment. Now, one would think, last I checked, this is kind of one of the principles of faith that we sign on to. Now, I know the eminent Dr. Mark Shapiro has been on Torah Motion in the past, and he wrote a whole book on the limits of Orthodox theology, questioning every single one of the Ani Mamins and showing how each and every one's a little bit iffy. But I think normative Judaism, rabbinic Judaism, we certainly believe that there is a Messiah that's supposed to come, and generally we believe that it can come any day. But we're going to see in a moment is that Moshe Feinstein takes us to the next level. So in a tshuva dated to Nisan Tufshin Lamed Tes 1979, so the month is important. It's in Nisan, shortly before Pesach comes. The tshuva opens up. All these blessings about having a special kosher and joyous yontif. Yisrael asher to talk about is he cites the Gemara that the verse.
We're not getting sound.
Yeah, Rabbi, your internet is we can't hear you well. Yeah, no, it's not only you, Rabbi. Okay, I need to be able
to simple and what removes. Let's see,
Rabbi.
Now.
Whoops.
Okay, hold on. We'll try to. Rabbi, do you hear me? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Can you?
Okay. Yeah, that's all right. He got kicked off. Okay. Well, wait a minute. I'm sure.
Okay, I got kicked off. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, because we didn't hear you the last minute at least.
Oh, okay. So let me backtrack. But you can hear me now, right?
Yes.
Okay. If not, I'll switch to my phone afterwards. All right. Darei Avru Kolakisi.
Okay, I would switch to your phone.
Says that there's this idea. 2 minutes while I switch over to that. Okay. I'll be on momentarily.
Okay.
While we're waiting, I'll tell you an interesting thing I learned from Rabbi Avraham Marmerstein. That's Zachary Hepner's rabbi. He said that until the middle of the 17th century, poskim tended to be makil as far as avelut yishena is concerned, and allowing meat and wine during the 9 days and 3 weeks. That was the tendency. But the middle of the 17th century, they changed because of Shabtai Tzvi.
Okay, that's interesting. We can pick that up later, but now I think the rabbi's back. Hopefully, a clearer connection. And
all right.
Okay, ready.
All right, we're just setting up my new office. I think the Wi-Fi signal needs to be worked on there. I appreciate your patience. You can hear me now?
Yep. Yes.
Please, God, it will continue. Yes, go ahead.
All right, wonderful. So the next idea is that Rav Moshe Feinstein essentially says that it's not enough just for someone to believe that Mashiach can possibly come, but one needs to actually believe that it could come at any moment. So he argues that actually calculating the Mashiach has been something that's been going on for quite a while. In fact, he says that one has to believe one needs to believe that it's not that Mashiach can come, but it's going to arrive imminently. And looks at the Gemara that comes
You're not
up
in a
in
good area.
Maseches Menachos. The Gemara Menachos. Now, this is something that maybe.
Rabbi.
Yeah.
Okay, you're outside now?
Yeah, I'm outside.
Okay, that'll be better connection than inside.
All right.
Okay.
Yes, I hope so. Give me a moment just to get to a shady spot so that way I don't dehydrate in the meantime.
Well, that's why you're at the end of the day, so not so.
I know.
Okay. I always impressed with the patience of people.
Okay.
Tisha B'Av, what else are you going to do? Okay.
All right. We're good?
I will find out.
Okay. Do you hear me?
I do now. Yes.
Okay.
So the next thing that he argues is that we have this idea of Chadash, this idea that every Pesach, we count Sfiras HaOmer. So Sfiras HaOmer actually is connected to something called the Karban Omer. Now, the Karban Omer, generally what happens is that this special barley offering is brought, and then following that, we're allowed to partake in the new grain. Now, this all sounds wonderful, but the Gemara tells us that Mishacharav Beis Hamikdash, that when the temple was destroyed, Hiskin Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai she Yom Hanef Kulo Aser. Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai declared that the entire Yom Hanef, that entire day following Pesach, it should be Aser, that no one should be able to partake in the new grain. Now, why is that? Because Mehera Yibana Beis Hamikdash. Because we assume that the Beis Hamikdash will suddenly be rebuilt, or we're concerned it'll suddenly be rebuilt. The Yomer, and everyone's going to say, wait a minute, last year, Milo Achal V'Heir Mizrach, were we not able to eat immediately when the sun came up? So Hasha Nami Nechol. Nowadays, can we eat here as well? But the point that Moshe Feinstein takes out from this is that it's basically there's a halachic concern. Generally when we think about Mashiach coming, we think of it as very much a machshava kind of idea, something that's philosophical. But in truth, actually, this is what I think is rather fascinating. Moshe argues that there's actually halachic implications, to the point that they made extra strictures on when one is allowed to partake of the new grain. That was due to the concern that the Beis Hamikdash would suddenly be rebuilt, which means that one could only eat once the actual Omer offering is brought. And if the Omer offering is not brought, I'm not allowed to partake in the new grain. And so we have actually the belief that Mashiach, that the Messiah can arrive imminently, that actually informs a real concrete halacha. It's not just something, we get into a circle, we put our arms over our friends, and we kumbaya together, and we sing about Mashiach coming, but it actually has a real concrete force. And he says this himself. He says, now, if believing Mashiach could come was only something that we believed maybe Mashiach could come, maybe it's going to arrive tomorrow, it was only a small possibility that I just have to believe that maybe Mashiach will come. Then Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai would not have gone so far as to forbid eating from the new grains the entire day following Pesach, out of concern that the Beis Hamikdash at the temple would be rebuilt. Rather, Ramosha argues that it's not enough to believe that Mashiach might come as a suffix, but we have to believe, and here's the key words, ke'ein vadai, that's almost as if it will certainly come the next day. Now, it doesn't mean we necessarily fool ourselves. If one believes that Mashiach's going to come every moment and then every day it doesn't come, it could be very, very daunting. What it means is that the halachic process wants us to anticipate that Mashiach can come at a moment's notice. So that's the main tshuva from Rav Moshe. Now here's where things get kind of interesting. Remember I told you about the Rav Moshe Feinstein cinematic universe, about how there were different svarim that go beyond the Igros Moshe that can inform us. One of them is, and this literally just came out last year, so I only managed to get hold of it recently. It's called Zekeinecha Yomrulach. It's from a Rabbi Chaim Mintz, who is a mashgiach at the Yeshiva of Staten Island.
The Yeshiva Staten Island is important for us here because Rav Reuven Feinstein, Rav Moshe's son, was the one who founded that yeshiva. So people who are giving us anecdotes about Rav Moshe Feinstein from there probably had some good interactions with him. He writes, Shemati Shadatz Maran Zatzal, the Ein Chinuch Katan Litanios, Rak Yom Kippur. Rav Moshe Feinstein believed that aside from Yom Kippur, one does not need to train their children to fast. Why not? Ki b'mehera yavo hagoel v'yivatlu shar hatanios. Because we believe that the Goel, the Redeemer, will come again at a moment's notice, and there's no need to practice fasting, right? The whole notion of now Yom Kippur, there's actual halachos that mandate us to train a child already, but in general, we don't need to be testing and we don't need to be training children to learn how to fast, because doing so is almost indicative that we believe that there'll be yet another year that we'll have to fast again. So this is yet another instance in where Rav Moshe Feinstein paskind in concrete halachic terms based on his philosophical principle and belief that one must believe that Mashiach could come again at a moment's notice. That's the second example. Let me give you a third example, and then I'll pause if there are any questions on this. This comes up in yet another sefer, not the Igros Moshe, but from Mesoris Moshe, from one of Rav Moshe Feinstein's grandchildren who accompanied him as his shamash at the end of his life. Right now, there's 4 thick volumes of Mesoris Moshe, and I think there's 2 others on the way, I'm told, assuming they get the funding to publish it. So the title of this section is Kivur V'Tos Isha B'Kever Shekantza Isha Acheres. I still remember back when I was in Connecticut. I remember one time we owned a number of different burial plots, a number of different cemeteries. We had one really odd one that it was the one time in my 5 years there that I went to it. We get there, the gentlemen who were responsible for setting everything up ahead of time, for digging the grave from the company, everything's set. We're ready to start the funeral. And then one of the mourners, family members, comes over and says, actually, they dug the wrong plot. That's the wrong plot, guys. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, what do we do? It's like 90 degrees outside and sunny. And then basically they were very adamant about it. They said, we bought this plot next to this family member. And so these poor, these workers are busy, closing up this hole, opening up a new one. It's a whole balagan. So that's when that I guess saves some agmas nefesh, some stress from later on. In this case, in Mesoris Moshe, they only discover sometime afterwards that they buried another person in someone else's kever, in someone else's burial plot next to someone else's family members. And the family members were adamant. They said, this is our burial plot and you should vacate it. Now, what do we think he did? Indeed, he paskind that it could be vacated, but with one precondition. Rabbeinu me'olam lo yatshi maharu lahasir hanikvar bekever gazel. He said, though, you shouldn't necessarily rush to do it. Why? De'ulai yavo Mashiach. Because who knows, maybe Mashiach will all of a sudden pop up and there will be no need because all of the dead will be revived and you won't have to worry about burying anybody at this point. So there you go. So 3 instances so far. One that Moshe points to in the Talmud about the Karban HaOmer, the Omer offering. Another one about children not having to learn how to fast except for Yom Kippur when they're old enough. And then on number 3, Rabbeinu also, Moshe also paskind that a kever, that a grave should not be exhumed speedily because we should assume that Mashiach will be arriving at any moment. Ke'ein vadai, almost as if with certainty that the Mashiach is imminent. So that's, you know what? I'll give you one more example, and this one's going to be a little bit controversial because we'll see there are those who disagreed with him on it. I'll give you 2 over here. I'm feeling very generous today. I owe you guys some extra Torah, right? So here we go. those who are looking at the source sheet, this is Os Zion on page number 2. Here's another nice, this is more of like a nice little anecdote, but I think it kind of brings out his philosophy again. Rabbeinu Kibel Bracha L'Shana Tova Meisa Rav Zakin. There's some other elderly rabbi who wished him a good year, and he gave Rabbeinu a bracha, he gave him a blessing. Umevakish b'chazara sheRabbeinu yivarchu sheyichya l'mea ve'esrim shana. And this elderly gentleman asks Rav Moshe Feinstein, can you give me a blessing that I shall live to 120 years? So most people, if someone asks me for a bracha to live 120 years, I mean, first I'll have to feign some humility and say, who am I giving a bracha, right? And then I'll give them a bracha that you should live until 120 years. Great. Rav Moshe responds, no. Yesh kanira anashim shechoshvim shloshayich yosem rizeh. Are there people who think you can't live beyond 120 years old? Lo margishim shebebias Mashiach yerach chaim. Don't they realize that Mashiach, we should expect, will come imminently at a moment's notice? Why should I only wish that you live till 120 years? I should wish you that you should continue living into the Messianic era and for all eternity. So we can see again how much Mashiach was on Rav Moshe Feinstein's mind. Now, I just, I wonder, if this, how much this might be a surprise. I know to me, people talk about Gedolim who cared about Mashiach, or, big rabbis. I mean, I guess for many of us, we think the Lubavitcher Rebbe or something when we hear about Mashiach, we hear about the Messiah. But Rav Moshe Feinstein's certainly not someone who comes to mind. Yet, the plot thickens again. Here's the slightly controversial one. This one is about a matzeva kafula, a double headstone. So you go to Jewish cemeteries. Many of the headstones, I'd imagine actually most of the headstones, are just individual headstones. Though if one goes ahead and looks around, you'll notice that some people have double headstones. And that generally happens when one spouse passes away. They will erect a double headstone. That way, when the next spouse eventually joins them, I guess after 120 or after, or hopefully Mashiach comes, which is the point we're about to get to, they'll be buried right next to them. So Rav Moshe Feinstein was asked about the propriety of a double headstone for a gravesite. And he answered as follows. This is Os Ches on page 2. To make a double headstone, while one of the spouses is alive, whether it be the man or whether it be the woman, Ein ruach chachamim nochem, he said. He doesn't say it's usser. He doesn't say it is forbidden, but he says the rabbis wouldn't be too pleased about this. Why? Here's the kicker. Kihu ke'ein kefira chas v'shalom. It is like one is almost denying bevias hamashiach, in the coming of the Messiah. One is essentially throwing in the towel, because one is essentially saying, I expect to be buried here in the diaspora. I expect to be buried here in Chutz La'aretz. I don't expect that shortly soon that the Messiah will arrive and will bring me to Eretz Yisrael. And he hedges things over here. He says, now, he doesn't give names, but he's clearly referring to a medieval debate in which Rambam, Maimonides, had to walk things back a little bit. There were some issues with Rambam kind of denying the idea that there would be Tchias HaMesim, that there'd be revival of the dead. So he essentially walks things back and says, well, there will be a revival, but then we'll all die again and we'll all become spirits. Ah, yes, I see a question. So is Israel as a double headstone okay? According to Rav Moshe Feinstein's reasoning, it probably would be okay. Well, that's an interesting point. It depends how you understand the Messianic era. It depends on your theology. If your theology is that all those who are living will just kind of continue living in the Messianic era, then it would be the same logic. If you assume people are still dying, right, as Rabbi Kelman points out over here, see, we're in progress here, and the Maral, amongst others, has. Oh, I lost the chat. Rabbi Kelman, you want to share the idea out loud? I'll catch my breath. It's okay.
Yeah, the Maral is buried in a double grave. It's all over. A lot of the Gedolim in Europe, they're buried in double graves with their wives. So, including
we have the advantage of you coming right back from a trip.
No, that was last year's trip, but I just figured, what we didn't go to great in Italy. You don't have cemeteries really the same way you do in Prague and in Central Europe. But anyways,
Well, let me tell you who else had a double headstone. Not that once the Maharal's doing it, others, I guess it's fair game. But for those who are following inside, if you look at Os Tes on page 3, source number 9, this is from Rabbi Herschel Schachter's book Mipnine Harav. He says in here, so he talks about Ramosha Feinstein's psak, not to have a double headstone. And then he writes, B'shas halvayis Rabbeinu, Zichron Levracha, when Rav Soloveitchik was being buried on Chol Moed Pesach, we saw that there stood Omed Shama Matseva Kafula Kever Isho Aleh Shalom. That we saw that indeed for his wife, who predeceased him by 25 years, there was already waiting for him a double headstone. And it would seem, because Soloveitchik presumably approved of that arrangement, that he disagreed with Ramosha Feinstein on this matter. Now, I mean, you probably don't need this. What would probably be better for everybody is not me, Panini Harab, telling you that, but I imagine anyone who's in Boston or Brookline or wherever it is can kind of go and put chazi. Go check it out for yourselves. It wouldn't surprise me. But I didn't have a picture of it, so the best I could give you were these words over here. But do we have anyone from Boston who can corroborate this for us? Or Rabbi Kelman, that needs to be the next Torah in Motion trip.
Okay, so I'm actually looking it up now. I'm going to see if I can post a picture. It's not exactly a double headstone. It is, although it's on one sort of thing beneath, but it's two separate stones like on one. I'll see if I can get the picture posted here for everybody to look. But well, give me a second. Okay, but go on.
Okay.
So it's not a classic double headstone, that's for sure.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so the plot thickens over here. I mean, the truth also is, I mean, who's to say that he was disagreeing on matters of theology? You know, there could be other reasons. For instance, so this is a sefer called Sharei Tzedek. I personally am not so familiar with it myself, but continuing to share with you the Ramosha Feinstein Cinematic Universe, there's yet another book called Psichas HaIgros. Psichas HaIgros is a book by Rabbi Yonasan Roseman, who's a major Talmid Chacham. He essentially collects everybody who agreed or disagreed with Ramosha Feinstein. It is a fantastic work. He collects virtually like 99.9% of everything. In fact, the source we'll see in a moment. I know we had Rabbi Tankin on earlier, and we'll have also her husband of blessed memory, B'nai Bunham, will cite momentarily. So there are those who disagree with Ramosha, and he does a good job collecting all of them. Many books I'm not familiar with. So one argument against Ramosha potentially is, Ulai kedayafiu lasas kein lecharchila. Maybe there is an argument, not just as a heter, but maybe lecharchila. Maybe ideally I should be erecting a headstone during my lifetime. It's like in Pirkei Avos, where we say that we always should be constantly thinking about doing teshuvah. There's all these stories about Bali Musar, about different rabbis who wanted to work on themselves. And so, there'd be stories that they'd have a coffin in a room, and every now and then they would go and they'd lie in the coffin to remind themselves that this is where I'm going to wind up. What am I doing with my life? So one could actually say, look, I believe Mashiach could come any moment, but I also believe my death could come any moment either. That's also something Chazal tell us to think about, that death can arrive at any moment. And so to keep teshuvah on our mind, maybe there's an idea of one erecting a headstone in their lifetime so that we can keep perspective on things. So that's one argument that could be made against Rav Moshe. But then there is a lengthy tshuva in B'nai Bunham, which basically Rav Yehuda Herzl Hankins Zatzal, he argues on several tshuvas of Rav Moshe. It's a whole series of argumentation against Rav Moshe Feinstein on a various tshuvos. What's very nice, actually, I love the opening to it. The opening, I don't have it here on the sheet, but he essentially says that Rav Moshe Feinstein, he had what was called koach hasvara. That, and he, if one looks at some of the response on Zmanim, for instance, he was asked questions. If I'm on a plane, what time do I go based on? So he says, even though there is a precedent for this in halakhic literature, I'm going to answer based on svara, based on logic. And Rav Hankin gives like a backhanded compliment. He says that it's true Rav Moshe had an exquisite koach hasvara, that his power of logic was incredible. But the issue is that when we base things on logic, and not everything could find a source to hang our hats on, or even if we do, Reuven's logic might be different than Shimon's logic, and there could be a degree of subjectivity on the matter. So that's how he opens up his tshuva, in which he begins with basic rabbinic apologetics for arguing against the Gadol Hador, and then he proceeds to argue with the Gadol Hador. One thing he points out is that in the earlier tshuva, Rav Moshe argued that essentially that only now are we allowed to start getting into this idea that all the different cheshbonos, all the different calculations have finally gone by. Mashiach can arrive at any moment now. Up until this moment, we did not expect Mashiach to come, but in the modern age, we do. He says on the bottom of page 3 in the bold, Mimasha Gdolei Rishonim, Rashi, Ramban, Rambam. Look at, Rashi, Ramban, Rambam. Need I say more than that? Chishvu Kitzim, they calculated when Mashiach would come. So actually, what's Rav Moshe Feinstein arguing? His argument is that I have to believe that Mashiach can arrive at a moment's notice. But if that is true, what were all of these medieval scholars doing calculating when Mashiach would arrive? You see, if I believe Mashiach, if I really believe that Mashiach can arrive at any moment, then what business do I have calculating Mashiach's arrival? Calculating when Mashiach will arrive is a way of me saying there's a lot of other times I don't expect Mashiach to arrive. So the fact that all of these great pillars of medieval Jewish scholarship are calculating when Mashiach will come is indicative that they arrived at a different conclusion than Rav Moshe Feinstein. It implies that they believe that essentially Mashiach could arrive only at certain times. That's what he would argue. That's argument number one he makes against Rav Moshe. The next argument he makes is based on his proof text from the Gemara Menachos, and I believe it's in Sukkah as well, about the Omer. If we remember the Karban Omer, we assumed that the Beis HaMikdash could be rebuilt at a moment's notice, and therefore we have to play it safe and we have to prohibit the entire day after Pesach that we cannot eat the new grains. And Rav Moshe infers from that Gemara that we are concerned even that Mashiach can come at a moment's notice. But is that really true? That I have to believe that Mashiach can come at a moment's notice? He writes in the next bolded section on page 3, Lefini estaiti, Maishna misharn yam shechashu behem gam l'safei katan, kiyam yom toshen shel galios. There are many instances in halacha in which we are concerned for, I see a question over here, perhaps calculations were to negate a false Messiah possibility. That, I can say more on that. By the way, I'm happy if people want to unmute to actually raise their haros. I've seen a number of very good points that are made in the chat, but it's a little bit hard for me to manage it from my screen over here. So if it flashes before my eyes and it's gone within 3 seconds. So if you have a good idea to share, don't be shy, my friends. It's good.
No,
it gives me a chance to breathe.
I just remember wondering that when there was the issue of a false Messiah, sometimes they did a calculation to show that this person could not be the Messiah.
Okay, so you're saying is that who's speaking? I only hear a voice out of the ether. It's like a bas call.
I'm sorry. It's Evelyn Hurst.
Oh, okay. Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
So yeah, that's a great point. I mean, they weren't saying with certainty it's arriving at this time, but they were trying to get. It's interesting because I could almost go the opposite way. I could say if we're calculating that a Messiah is going to arrive, that creates false hope. I remember like imagine like the Y2Ks and like all these false raptures that were going to happen. And then the rapture doesn't come. So, I mean, when a false Messiah claims that on this and this date, the Messiah is going to come and then it doesn't come. I mean, think about the Second Temple sects. Think about, I know scholars debate whether the Qumran sect were the Essenes, but let's assume they're the same people. once their prophecies do not really come to light, it's kind of hard to hang on to the religion at that point. So one can almost argue it's better to hedge our bets and say, we don't know when it's coming. That way you can never say I'm wrong. But I hear the merit to your argument there as well. Okay. But going back to Rav Hankin argues that essentially, yes, there are times in halacha, achari rab lahatos, we go based on majorities. But certain things are so important that we go based on even small possibilities as well. Why is it? I know we mentioned people are in Canada and America here, and I'm sure people are in other areas in the diaspora. Why do we have to keep a second day of Yom Tov today? Shema tigzer malchus gezerah v'asi kalkule sheyishkachu esoda ibor. In Maseches Beitz it says maybe the government will come, they'll snatch away all of our calculations, right? We'll never we'll lose all of our Ezra's Torah luachs. Which, by the way, this is like a parenthetical. I pointed out to my, I always like to point this out. Rav Hankin doesn't make an appearance in this particular shir, but he makes an appearance in other shirim in the Igros Moshe series that I do, like on civil marriage and refrigerators and other issues as well. So it's kind of a shame. We have this book called the Ezra's Torah Luach, and people just kind of know Rav Hankin for that reason. But honestly, I mean, what would we do without it? What would rabbis and gavayim across the country, when would they know when to say Kel Maleh and when not to say Tachanot, if not for that book?
Well,
I see someone in the chat mentioned something about the Soviet Union.
Well, which Rav Hankin are we talking about?
Sorry. Oh, you're right. We're talking about a lot of Hankins over here. Rav Yosef Eliyahu Hankin, the grandfather of Yehuda Herzl Hankin that we mentioned. Today is just a day of Hankins. I guess we got a trifecta over here. And I see some of my Balabatim are on here. I see Rabbi Allen and Abby Weiner over there. Rabbi Allen Weiner was showing me that there was a book from Rabbi Eitan Hankin that he was reading that he showed to me. He also has a sefer, I think, on Bedikas Tolaim, on checking for bugs in halacha. Lachem Yeh Lo'ochla, I believe is the name of it. Now, I bought the book thinking I was going to get all these great leniencies of how you don't have to check strawberries or or raspberries or bugs, but maybe I don't like hard enough. I didn't find all the leniencies I was looking for. It's still a remarkable work of scholarship. And the truth be told, we were saying in the keynotes this morning, we mourned not only the lives that were lost, but the Torah that was cut short as well. I mean, Rabbi Eitan Hankin, I'm sorry, I don't have the precise age, but he was murdered al Kiddush Hashem, his family, at such a young age. And so much Torah was produced by him at such a young age. I mean, imagine if only we had him for the full length of life. Imagine how much scholarships. I mean, that's truly consonant with the theme of the day, unfortunately. But okay, so that was the truth. There's a lot more to that tshuva from Rabbi Yehuda Herzl Hankin. I'll say Ayin Sham. Take a look over there. One other last little footnote before we get to what I think is the main part that I want to get to. Is actually Rav Moshe Feinstein on theology. So I'll just put this as a footnote. It's actually I put the part from Limits of Orthodox Theology in English over here, so you can read the footnote yourself. Rav Moshe in a tshuva about mezuzahs makes a very startling assertion. Now we know that Rambam, Maimonides, was the consummate rationalist. Rambam essentially, he minimizes supernatural events to the nth degree. And so one would think that Rambam would not really believe in heebie-jeebies so much. So, for instance, a mezuzah for Rambam is less about spiritual protection on one's home and more just about, perhaps, general awareness of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. But he writes, "V'ninsa shegam harambam." This is the top of page 4. Moda she'ika shmira b'shemos malachim u'shemos kedoshim u'psukim. But the Rambam, Rav Moshe says, actually believes that having names of angels and names of different psukim, of verses, can protect somebody. And in the Limits of Orthodox Theology, Dr. Mark Shapiro takes him to task on it. He says, although Rabbi Moses Feinstein was the greatest posek of this time, he seems to have no knowledge of Maimonidean philosophy. Now, I read that, and both my eyebrows went up. I have a lot of respect for Dr. Shapiro, and I know exactly why he's troubled by this tshuva. But I think it's quite an assertion to say that Rav Moshe Feinstein had, to quote, no knowledge of Maimonidean philosophy. And how do I know that? I will back it up right now. If you will turn back for a moment, for those who have the sheet in front of them or the PDF, you'll scroll back to page number 2. Remember that tshuva about the double headstone we looked at momentarily beforehand? In that tshuva, he writes, "Va'af lahasovrim shetia misa lebnei adam." Even according to those opinions that hold that mankind will die once again, even achrei bias hamashiach, even after the Messiah comes, even after many days, he acknowledges Rambam's opinion, Rambam's philosophy vis-a-vis the revival of the dead, vis-a-vis Trias HaMeis. Now, he doesn't say Rambam by name, but I'm pretty certain he knows that that was the Rambam. So I just wanted to bring up this point, this claim that was made against Moshe Feinstein, and from a source that we just saw today. Now, I'm not saying Moshe Feinstein was not necessarily what you would call a Baal Machshava. Now, he has drushos, he knows Machshava, he knows homiletics, he knows Medrash. In fact, by the way, I mean his son-in-law, Rev Tendler, who I learned with, he once asked for Soloveitchik. He said, "Rebbe, I'm having trouble coming up with an original drusha every year. Can you help me? Every week for Shabbos. Where do I get good fresh material from?" So Soloveitchik, matter of fact, he turned to him and said, "You should learn Medrash Rabbah. That'll give you some good material to use in your sermons." So if Rav Tendler was learning it, I'm sure Moshe Feinstein was well versed in Medrash Rabbah. And I have sources that indicate that Moshe Feinstein, though he did not like using Kabbalah in the halachic process, he actually did study Kabbalah as well. He distinguishes between earlier Kabbalah, and I'm not getting into the authorship of the Zohar and all that. It's a whole other class, my friends. I'm sure some of you have heard of it already. But he distinguishes between that and Lurianic Kabbalah, which he says should have no place in the halachic system. But here's the interesting thing. Even though Moshe Feinstein in some ways is a halachic purist, he is forced to take theological stances on halachic issues. Moshe Feinstein did not set out to write a hashkafic piece on Mashiach, but he was asked a halachic question about burial, and that leads him to make an assertion about the nature of when Mashiach will come by way of getting to a legalistic ruling, which is remarkable. That's what I find most fascinating, when the legalists, when the halachists are forced to deal and dabble in theology because the halachic question in front of them presupposes certain theological assumptions. I mean, when you get to Hilchos Avelos, the laws of mourning, think about how much has been influenced by Kabbalah in that regard. So one needs to be aware of those. All right, let me pause because we're about to get into the final stretch. Any questions or any further comments that people want to make on what we just raised about the theology part before we get to the home stretch?
I want to know, Rabbi Marmerstein, who in Upper West Side says that Avelut Yeshena used to be not important made 9 days and the 3 weeks not important until the middle of the 17th century, when people followed Shabtai Tzvi. Are you aware of that?
I'm not personally aware of it. That's why I logged on over here. I get to learn new things myself by coming on. Though something just interesting, like I think that you're pointing out about the strictures of the 3 weeks and the 9 days. I'm sorry. I'm being okay. I'll finish addressing this and then I'll behave and I'll take the rest of the questions at the end. Is that Moshe Feinstein we dealt with this in the shir at my shul. We had a question about music during Sfira and during the 3 weeks. But Moshe points out, like many poskim do, that there's a question we should be listening to music all year round. The Gemara in Gittin seems to imply, based on which Rishon you read, that music was forbidden after destruction of the temple in general. So, it's true some strictures became harder and more fastened over time, but it's possible that also we've taken certain liberties as time has gone on. But okay, I'll wrap up and in my last 12 minutes, and then I'll try to take some questions at the end. Okay, last source on page number 4. More books from the Moshe Feinstein Cinematic Universe. I'm sorry if I look so happy on Tisha B'Av. I get excited when I get to share these sources with more friends. This is called Man Malchi Rabbanan. Has anyone ever heard of a book called Man Malchi Rabbanan? So it's not a separate book. It's a trick question. I didn't want to stumble anybody here. At the beginning of the 8th volume of Igros Moshe, the first one I believe that was published posthumously, At the beginning of there's I think it's about a 32-page Hebrew biography written by Rav Shabtai Rappaport and Mordechai Tendler, grandchild-in-law of Rav Moshe Feinstein. There's material in there that does not appear in the ArtScroll biography. So there's some solid stuff in there. And then there's some that overlaps. This might be an overlap. Rabbeinu al Chorban u'mitzapli shubachol nafsho. Rabbeinu was Rabbeinu. Every time we say Rabbeinu means Rav Moshe Feinstein. He was pining for the ultimate salvation with all of his soul. B'Tisha B'Av, hayalovish me'il yashan ubaloy shahaya af karua b'mixas. He wore a worn out garment on Tisha B'Av. So not just some people when they're in Avelis, they don't even want to tear the shirt. They'd rather go for the ribbon. Rav Moshe Feinstein, I don't know if he used the same one from year to year. And it's possible he didn't exactly have the fanciest wardrobe either, is my understanding. In fact, I don't think most people are aware of this. I wasn't aware of it until I read it. We all think of Moshe Feinstein as coming from Russia and coming, straight to the Lower East Side. He was actually with his family in Williamsburg. Now, I know Williamsburg is all hipster nowadays, and it's the place to be. But back then, it wasn't the most attractive of places. And he would commute once a week back and forth from yeshiva to his home because the subway fare wasn't so expensive. But he hardly had any money that if he were to travel back and forth every single day, he would essentially not have a paycheck to bring home. So I corroborated this with people who learned in MTJ that Rav Moshe Feinstein, he would sleep on the pews of Mesivta Tiferes Yerushalayim, only coming home once a week for Shabbos to his family, until eventually they moved to the Lower East Side. So, he was far from being a wealthy man. But Hatzarva Eva Chorban Hanimshachaya Nikar Me'abeina Mikol Hanagaso. But the tsar, the anguish that he felt, was clear upon his visage. In fact, turning the page, at the end of Pesach, 4 years before his passing, now most people, I grew up in the Far Rockaway in the New York area. So most people, after Pesach is over, they're running to one of the 3 million pizza shops and they're trying to order sushi and they're all busy bidding their money for the first pie of pizza. That's what I grew up with, at least. Or in my case, we just took frozen pizza out. What was Rav Moshe Feinstein doing in the hours after Pesach was over? He was sad. He was despondent. Why? Amar sheshuv avar haPesach. Mashiach adayin lo ba. That another year came by and Mashiach had not arrived. That's what he was thinking about at the end of Pesach. Another Pesach came by and there was no Mashiach. In fact, at a family gathering when he had a great-grandchild, there were people who were, every time someone got up to give a speech, they were making brachos. And they give a bracha that he should live to see yet another great-grandchild be born from this one. And he would answer each and every time saying, Amen, halavai ribona sha'olam, may it be God's will. And he explained with the same logic again, that if one believes that the Mashiach can arrive at a moment's notice, then one could actually answer that bracha with full conviction. And this is something that I noticed, actually. You see, when one looks at, this is like a classic rabbi thing, right? You don't know how to end a speech. Maybe I'll do this at the end of this one. So what do we say at the end of the speech? And we shall be zocha, the Beis HaMikdash should be rebuilt. B'mheira v'yameinu, amen. So, sorry, being attacked by a bee over here. We should all pray that the Beis HaMikdash will be rebuilt. And this is something that Rav Moshe Feinstein says several times in his tshuvos. He says at the end of the introduction to Igros Moshe, that we should be zocha lilmod lamed kol yom l'zakut sonachol Yisrael bekarov legula shlema d'Mashiach bedel b'nei b'Beis HaMikdash amen, etc. So he says at the end of the introduction, but then he says it again. He has a tshuva about the status of a cheresh, of one who's a mute, who's not able to speak, not able to hear, and after dealing with the halachic intricacies of one who is not able to communicate in the standard fashion, he concludes the tshuva by writing, but I conclude with a bracha that everything I write here should not be practical in nature. We should not have these maladies. Everyone should be able to have the ability to communicate in the proper fashion. And those who are a cherish already, that they should be healed immediately with the imminent coming of our Mashiach. Like we anticipate literally every single day. Now, if Moshe Kurtz ended something that way, it would sound like a trite bracha. It's like, okay, a nice little thing that every rabbi says because they don't know how to end off otherwise. But for Moshe Feinstein to say it, I think with the background of information we got, the same Moshe Feinstein who said, I really believe, Kain Vadai, the Mashiach will come at a moment's notice, that meant something when he wrote it. And let's see, we'll prioritize a few of the sources over here. This is a good story to end off with. I'll end off with two anecdotes, and then I'll end with questions. The final anecdote, it's at the last source on page number 6. This is actually in English, so I'll read it verbatim. And this is from again, second and final source from our Moshe Feinstein Cinematic Universe we'll reference today. There is a biography, not the art scroll biography that my Rebbe I don't think was actually interviewed for, and he wasn't so happy about that. But Rav Moshe David Tendler, again, Rav Moshe Feinstein's son-in-law, wrote a biography in English that's on, I think it's called Rav Moshe Feinstein Incorporated.com or something online. And he writes the following, a very powerful story. As already stated, Rav Moshe was the most humble and modest of men. He never expected anyone else to acknowledge his greatness, but he never failed to acknowledge it himself. A few years before his passing, Rav Moshe had to have a pacemaker installed. And I was the one who explained to him the reasons for the procedure. During the day while he was engaged in giving shiurim, writing shuvos, or answering questions from all over the world, his blood pressure was perfectly normal. However, a 24-hour cardiac monitor revealed that at night while asleep, his blood pressure became precipitously low. Only while engaged in studying and teaching Torah was it normal. In the past, he had often balked at going to the doctor for a general checkup, but had always been willing to see a physician when he felt something was amiss. This time, however, and quite uncharacteristically, he was reluctant to go forward with the pacemaker. I asked him to explain his hesitancy, given that every doctor consulted agreed that the proposed pacemaker was essential. Several more days passed, and he still had not agreed to go for the procedure. I finally confronted him. Shver, my father-in-law, this is not your way. You always make up your mind very quickly. Why is it taking you so long? Rav Moshe finally answered, I know how unworthy I am. I know how little Torah I know. But I am also aware that if they are to pick 71 people to make up a Sanhedrin, the great rabbinical court of old, among the 71, they'll most likely pick me as one of their members. However, a Balmum, someone with a physical blemish, cannot be a member of the Sanhedrin. I am perturbed at the thought of doing something to myself that would make me unfit to join the Sanhedrin when Mashiach comes. Rav Tendler continues, I then reviewed the surgical procedure for him. I showed him some diagrams illustrating exactly what would be done. After listening carefully, he said, that is not considered a Balmum. Please make the appointment right away. And while this might sound like a happy ending to the story, Rav Tendler concludes, sadly, Mashiach did not come. A Sanhedrin was not convened, and Rav Moshe was not chosen to be a member. God willing, Mashiach will be here very soon, and we will merit to see the building of the Beis HaMikdash and the establishment of the Sanhedrin. That's how the biography ends. This was everything for the most part. I glossed over a few items. There is an article version of this if you would like. But there's one thing after I researched everything and I put together the source sheet that I found later in the game. But for me, it really blew the entire sugya wide open. Something that bothered me throughout the entire course of this topic is Rav Moshe's seeming obsession with Mashiach. Certainly more so than other Lithuanian Gedolim. Why was Rav Moshe Feinstein so seemingly obsessed with Mashiach to the point that it altered the halachic process for him? And I don't want to sound presumptuous to say I found the one reason. I think he believed what he believed because he intellectually thought it was true. But upon reading more about Rav Moshe Feinstein, I realized that he had not 2 sons, but he had 3 sons actually. Rav David Feinstein, Zichron Levracha, Rav Ruvain Feinstein Shlita, and there was also a young boy named Pesach, who unfortunately and tragically predeceased them when they were still back in Russia. And I read in the introduction to one of the halakim of Ephraim Greenblatt's Rivos Ephraim, a short throwaway line in his tribute to Rav Moshe. He cites, and I couldn't find where it was, but somewhere in the Dibros Moshe and Bava Basra, Kasav al Benoha Katan Pesach Sheniftar, he writes about his son Pesach, who predeceased them, Sheyirenu Bekarov, that he looks forward to seeing him soon, Ki Hemen Shemashiach Miad Yavo, because he believed that Mashiach would come imminently. When I read that, that blew open the entire topic for me. I would posit, behind all of the halachic analysis and behind all of the theology, there was a man who dealt with great tragedy, and his wife as well, early on in their lives. And that was something that I don't think Rav Moshe ever truly was able to heal from. I think it was Rav Chaim Mitzvah reported that Rav Shishkal, his son-in-law, and Pesach, his son. Rav Moshe was not an emotional man, by the way. You know, like a classic Litvak. But when it came to Yisker, for Rav Shishkal and for his son Pesach, that's when he would be crying profusely and uncontrollably. So I think behind this, I don't have something unfortunately inspirational here, but I think on Tisha B'Av, we understand that there's the collective tragedy that the Jewish people have experienced and we continue to experience as we see in Eretz Yisrael today, but also understanding that behind that, there's also the individual tragedies, the individual challenges that we all feel. And my blessing is, and I try to say it's not in a trite way, but with the conviction of Moshe Feinstein, that Ein Vadai, may it be his will, that indeed Mashiach will come in the blink of an eye, Keheref Ayin, and that all will be healed and that all sadness will be wiped away from our eyes. Thank you for this opportunity, everyone. And thank you, Rabbi Kelman.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, any quick questions before we go? As I'll throw in, yeah, wanted to say something? Okay, otherwise I'll say.
Until you told us about the son, Pesach Feinstein, that incredible story at the end, I wondered whether Reb Moshe's being sad when Pesach ends is his justification for Zecher LeMikdash LeHillel. He sees Zecher LeMikdash LeHillel as a messianic element in the Pesach.
That's a very interesting suggestion. If there's a parallel between the name Pesach and the holiday of Pesach and redemption, I don't know, but I think that's a very good theory. I appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you. Thank you very much for a fantastic Shvat Torah. Wow.
Thank you. And thank you for bearing with me, guys. I appreciate you holding on.
Rabbi, if I may, I'm going to defend Mark Shapiro and his comment about Moshe.
I want to say also, I also want to say, I put it on here because I own the book and I love Dr. Mark Shapiro. That one line over there, I thought just went a little step too far.
The
but
truth of the matter is, I don't know exactly with Rav Moshe, but many of the Gdolim never read the Mourning Nevuchim. I would say the majority. In Lithuania, Rav Chaim Brisker didn't read the Mourning Nevuchim because Rav Soloveitchik says his grandfather never read the Mourning Nevuchim. So, in other words, the many Gdolim are totally unaware of the Rambam's philosophical things. The fact that they know the Rambam may not have believed in a physical resurrection, that you don't have to read the Mourning Nevuchim to know that. In other words, that came up because of the whole controversy. So, whatever. It's just a statement of fact. That most Gedolei Torah had zero interest, and you know, if you read Rev Elia Meir Bloch's letter and different things, I mean, it became, because of the Haskalah, it became almost forbidden to read this stuff. Even even written by great people like the Rambam. So that's just sort of ignored. So I think Mark is actually correct, if I may
Yeah.
say so. That Ramosha really was totally not aware. Ramosha was great. I love Ramosha, unbelievable. But that wasn't his field. He did not know philosophical understanding. I just think,
Right.
all right, but we can, we can ask other people more expert than us. But
Yeah, I think I agree. I certainly agree with the general thrust of the argument that these are halachis, and these are halachis who did not really deal with theology that much. Though I guess, this is just like a footnote, I think, later on in the book, so maybe I'm being medaic too much in it. But to say he seems to have no knowledge of Maimonidean philosophy, period, that's a little bit too strong of a statement in my opinion. I think to say that he was not an expert in Maimonidean philosophy, that I could get behind. But to
I
say
guess
no
the
knowledge of
Ramosha,
Maimonidean philosophy, that's he
I
clearly
mean, it's
demonstrates that. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's another.
Yeah.
Listen, the truth of the matter is,
Yeah.
philosophy. The Rav felt that we when he wrote his letter about how the smicha program and why you should be, there have to be more study machshava because he knows that in Lithuania the Gedolei Israel didn't touch this
Yeah.
stuff, and they wouldn't go near it actually. But anyway, okay. Really want to thank anybody who was here for all 8 hours, and I thank the Zeitmans again. It should be Le'ilui Nishmat, their parents, Meir and Sylvia, and for all of us, we should have happy occasion. I also don't know, whatever. I don't want to get into the thrust of the shir. I think Ramoshe is unique in the way you describe it, the messianic expectation. I don't think other Gedolim had that.
Oh yeah, of course. And now that I appreciate you saying that.
Right.
That's specifically the point I want to bring out. And that's
Correct.
why I was scratching my head thinking like, why is he obsessed with it when his, Lithuanian Rosh Yeshiva Gedolim counterparts are not thinking that way? So that's kind of what I wanted to explore. It wouldn't be an interesting shear if everyone else thought that way.
Yeah, no, correct. Rav Moshe is very unique. It's not the generally thing. And I remember when I was there years ago. So somebody told me Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, some people, Mashiach's not coming this year for sure. Like, in other words, there's this fear of, you sort of alluded to, well, it's a little bit Sabbateanism and all this other. It can erode faith if you really think the Mashiach can come. It is hard. I don't think. I don't think the Mashiach. Maybe I shouldn't say. I'll get into trouble. I'll be called a heretic. But I paskin like the Rambam. For Soloveitchik. It's after. This is the last thing, so we can go on forever till another hour until mincha. But the famous dispute: will the Mashiach come with or without tshuva? So the Rambam says the Mashiach will only come if we do tshuva. So I think it's pretty obvious. Bnei Israel hasn't done enough tshuva to bring the Mashiach, which means he's not coming so fast. So the Rav Soloveitchik and Allah Tshuva, I'm sure asked that question. So maybe the Mashiach will never come. Maybe we'll never do tshuva. So how can the Rambam? It's the same Rambam who rules that the Mashiach is only coming if we do tshuva. The same Rambam says we have to believe in the Mashiach. So Soloveitchik points out that belief in the Mashiach means belief in the ability of Klal Yisrael to do tshuva. He says that's a very hard belief to have. You look at the Jewish people, how we fight and argue and all the other things we do, and it's hard to believe, but we have to believe. But it doesn't mean we believe it's going to happen tomorrow. Like that, I don't literally believe the Mashiach is going to come tomorrow. Like whatever. It's like I believe one day when we learn the lessons of Tisha B'av, he'll come, but hasn't happened yet. What can I say?
Yeah.
Anyways, okay. Anybody else? Anybody want to call me a heretic? Vakasha, what can I tell you? But it's okay. But okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Really, Yasher Koach, like I said at the beginning, or maybe I didn't say it this year, but Tisha B'av, I find next to Yom Kippur is the most inspiring day of the year. I don't like it necessarily, but it's very, very beautiful day, and to have really to spend the whole day, in the morning learning the keynote a little bit, and then really from the last 8 hours having wonderful presentations, and really thank for those who come and. Whatever. You should have happy occasions tomorrow. Tamar Weissman is going to be having her regular shiurim, and Rabbi Shulman on Tuesday, and partially on Thursday, my shiur on Wednesday. And please God, in the next week or so, we're working on our Elo program. That will, when it's finalized, we'll let you know in the next week or so. But anyways, everybody should be well. We should have happy times and look forward to when Tisha B'av really will. It's the Navi Zechariah promises us. Tisha B'av one day will be a holiday, and let us hope that day is soon. Okay, bye-bye, everybody. Be well. Thank you.